Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, now, it is a year since Taliban fighters carried out one of the worst terror attacks in Pakistan's history, storming into a Peshawar school, gunning down more than 141 people, most of them children. We hear from Malala in a moment, but first, Fatima Manji has been talking to a survivor of that attack and the traumatic memories which remain.
In Pakistan today, 1 year on, the memories are raw. Many still in shock and angry at how children as young as 10 were killed so brutally. They went from class to class, shooting school children and their teachers. 152 people, mostly young students, killed as the Pakistani Taliban carried out a massacre at this army-run school in Peshawar. 14-year-old Ahmed Nawaz was shot in the arm, but survived the attack by playing dead as a gunman searched the room.
I was laying on the ground, I was bleeding heavily. Every next moment was worse than the previous. Then when I looked at my teacher, she was burnt alive by the terrorists. And I was looking at her and crying because I was unable to help her. I was injured.
Memorials across the country are tinged with talk of action against those who did this, to make sure it never happens again. The army released this high-budget song. The children sing about how they want to take revenge by educating the children of the enemy. In reality, though, in the aftermath of the attack, the army set up military courts to deal with terrorism, and Pakistan controversially lifted a 7-year moratorium on death penalties. But the government is still being accused of not doing enough to crack down. Ahmed Nawaz and his family now live in Birmingham, where he was treated for his injuries. He often thinks about the attack and his brother who didn't make it.
When I heard that my brother is killed in that attack, I was shattered. I lost my dear younger brother, and I was feeling even worse and guilty thinking of that morning when he was repeatedly telling me that he did not want to go to school. But I insisted and forced him to go. He was my younger brother, just 1 year younger than me. He was my best friend. We used to fight, we used to do everything together.
1 year on, as survivors still recover and the school day continues for millions in Pakistan, a final farewell for the children of Peshawar and a pledge, never again.
Well, another young person who survived a Taliban attack is, of course, Malala Yousafzai, who won last year's Nobel Peace Prize. When I spoke to her earlier today, we talked about the wider perception of the Islamic community. But I started by asking her what progress is now being made on her campaign for girls' education, particularly in her homeland of Pakistan.
It's not that they do not want education for girls, but then there's that lack of interest for the children for the poor children. There's lack of interest for thinking of the poor families who need help. So it's that, again, that political ideologies that they have to, and then sadly there's corruption as well.
It's now 3 years that you've been here in Birmingham. Are you a Brummie?
I think I am a Brummie, and I'm proud to be a Brummie, and also I'm really thankful to people here in the UK for all their support, their love, and for making me feel that this is home and that you have the right to live, and that you deserve love and kindness.
Do you think realistically you'll ever be able to go back to Pakistan?
I hope so, but it also depends on what happens in future. But I'm very hopeful that I will be.
I believe you're now a feminist. Is it easy for a Muslim woman, a Muslim young woman, to say, I am a feminist, or does it create issues with adults that you meet?
I think in terms of religion, there's not a very clear-cut answer to these issues. For example, women's rights, or in terms of politics. So religion is interpreted in different ways by different people. But to me, Islam is about equality, and calling myself feminist would have no opposition from the religion.
Do you think there will be mullahs who will support your view?
I think there are some people who just do not believe in women's rights and women having a voice at all. I don't know how really to convince them, because they have just taken it as part of their faith.
How easy is it for you to be a normal 18-year-old?
I try my best, but I have got some wonderful friends in my school who keep me normal. I've got two brothers who are really, really cheeky. They keep me normal. They're younger than me.
I mean, it is a tense time now. The terror attack in Leytonstone, maybe it wasn't a terror attack, we don't know, maybe the act of somebody who was just mentally unwell. But perhaps the one beautiful thing was the guy calling out, "You ain't no Muslim, bruv." How did you react to that?
Well, it's been very tragic, but it's time that we unite, we come together, and just to remember these terrorists, they might call themselves Muslim, but it does not mean that now all Muslims are terrorists. So people who are standing up, who are saying that this is not Islam, killing people is not Islam, Islam is peace. So it gives us hope.
Do you feel there is more Islamophobia?
Well, I just can't really say, because it depends on the experience of each and every person. But I think that it's important that media also portray a positive image, in a way that if one terrorist comes and attacks someone, and that terrorist is unfortunately Muslim, does not mean that now every Muslim in the world is blamed. There are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world.
There seem to be many ingredients, and I mean the war in Syria, which you mentioned, is clearly one. I mean, did you personally find yourself exercised by the vote on whether to bomb or not in Syria?
We have seen throughout history there has been wars. There has been war in Iraq, in Afghanistan, but those wars by these countries have not stopped terrorism. Terrorism still continues, and what we lack is education. We do not invest in that country's education to educate the future generation and to stop them from picking guns. Like, you cannot really stop it by killing them.
It's a very febrile, tense atmosphere at the moment. I mean, just as we speak now, all the schools in Los Angeles have been shut because of a terror threat. And there are also very wild things being said by politicians about Islam and about Muslims. How do you feel about that? How can that be dealt with? I can just highlight one thing, that the more you speak against Islam and against all Muslims, the more terrorists will it create. So it's important that whatever politicians say, whatever media says, they should be really, really careful about it. If your intention is to stop terrorism, do not try to blame the whole population of Muslims for it, because it cannot stop terrorism. It will rather create more terrorists. So it's important that they try to show harmony towards Muslims and say that they are accepted in this world, they deserve the right to live, and that they are normal people. Malala, talking to me earlier, one of those challenges facing young Muslims across Britain, especially over the last few weeks, a time of rising tension from the Paris attacks, the decision to join bombing raids in Syria. Our reporter Asad Beg has been out in inner city Birmingham to find out how attitudes have changed and the impact of rising Islamophobia. And we should warn you, there is some strong language in his report.
Birmingham, Britain's second city, and home to one of the largest Muslim populations in the UK. A community clustered in the poorest inner city neighbourhoods, and now feeling the consequences of global events.
The last time I was here in Birmingham, Muslims in Britain were reacting to a range of issues, from the rise of the so-called Islamic State to allegations of extremists infiltrating schools. What I found was young men and women struggling to find acceptance in their own country. Since then, there's been two major attacks in Paris, UK anti-terror laws have been beefed up, and now Britain is bombing ISIS in Syria.
So how has it all impacted on people here? I've come back to find out. In a local shisha bar in Nechells, a popular hangout for young guys, there's a sense of being under attack from politicians, the media and the wider public.
David Cameron recently said, whoever doesn't vote for the war in Syria is an ISIS sympathizer. Yeah? So how can we express our feelings without being labelled terrorists? I personally think myself is the way that the Jewish community felt when Hitler was actually terrorising them. That's what the British are doing to Muslims within Britain.
Come on guys, they're not putting you in concentration camps.
No, they're not putting it, not yet.
What you think? Is that what you think?
It's getting close. It's getting close to that. There's a lot of other youngsters who feel this way as well. I mean, like I said, when I'm going on the train, I mean, I'm getting funny looks from people. Why is that? I mean, we've not caused no harm to any people, but it seems as though the people are watching the news, they're reading the newspapers, reading Facebook, and everybody's being brainwashed into thinking that a terrorist is a Muslim.
This Islamophobic attack on a bus in London took place in October.
You see, that's why like you people. You come to England and you have manners. Go back to your country.
In the immediate aftermath of the Paris attacks, hate crimes targeting Muslims tripled in London alone. The Metropolitan Police specifically log Islamophobic incidents, but only in October did the government confirm that this will be done nationwide. One report says the majority of victims are women. I met a group of students at the University of Birmingham.
Where do you think this hate and Islamophobia is coming from?
I think the way in which news reports exploit and use these situations as a pretext to launch attacks on Muslims and perpetuate negative stereotypes. So, for example, The Sun claiming that 1 in 5 Muslims sympathise with ISIS. These things have tangible consequences.
There was a girl in Birmingham New Street, like this was 7:30 in the morning, and she was attacked by a guy, like literally punched in the face just for wearing a hijab. And we shouldn't feel that way. We shouldn't have that threat. We shouldn't be scared to go out of our houses.
Is that how you feel? Do you fear for your safety?
Yeah, I fear for my safety.
If we're around university at a late time, then we're having to travel in groups or with someone.
Don't you think that there should be condemnation from the Muslim community when stuff like Paris happens?
I think there's this expectation for Muslims to apologise for the actions of extremists and who are essentially un-Islamic despite what they might say. So I've heard people say that they've yet to hear Muslims condemn the attacks. So there exists this notion that we're somehow complicit and worse, responsible for terrorism. And as a Muslim, I can say that I don't condone any kind of massacre. As a humanitarian, I don't think there's any way you can logically defend murder, as many politicians do. But at the same time, I don't think I should apologise for their actions, because then there's this recognition that I'm somehow part of it, and I'm not.
The government says it's doing everything it can to engage with this community and others like it across the country, to show young Muslims in particular that there is a place for them in British society. But is it working? Last year, I visited Sal and his mates who work out at a gym in the city.
I served in the British Army. I don't feel British. I don't want to be British, but I'm going nowhere.
Back in the gym, the same guys say the decision to bomb Syria has made things worse.
I'm not just angry about it. The Muslim community are just angry about it. The whole community, everybody is angry about what's going on.
The British foreign policy is now perfect propaganda for ISIS. If ever you wanted a recruitment mandate for ISIS, it's just British foreign policy.
But do you think that the Muslim community is in denial? Because there's people from the UK that have gone to join ISIS. These people are from Muslim communities in the UK and they're being radicalised and they're going...
Is the Christian community in denial when all these Christians are shooting each other in American schools? It's got nothing to do with Christians and this has got nothing to do with Muslims.
But groups like ISIS quote the Quran, they quote the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and they give religious arguments.
The Ku Klux Klan used to have crosses and sheets and talk about Christianity, but nobody ever turned around and says, let's blame all the Christian world for the Ku Klux Klan. They're marginalised, they're isolated, and they're called out for what they are, a bunch of extremists running around with hoods on.
However, some here feel that Muslims in the UK are quite lucky, attracted by Britain's more tolerant multiculturalism, like Abdul Malik, who moved here from France.
I mean, I've been here for over 10 years, and concerning my religion, I never had a problem. I've worked for different companies, for different people. I never had a problem with my religion. In France, if I would ask someone a place to pray, they may even refuse me to give. They may even refuse to give me a job. They would straight away tell me, you're not here, you know, to pray and everything. And in here, we see it like, wow, they give us like extra rights compared to, you know, to what we actually expect.
Even if Britain is more tolerant than other countries in Europe, some Muslims born and bred here feel the old prejudices are as strong as they've ever been.
The way I basically see it is like this: a dog born in a stable is still a dog. Just because it's born in the stable, it doesn't make it a horse. Just the way us being born in this country doesn't make us English, doesn't make us white. We'll always be labelled as Muslims, as terrorists.
Barely a week passes without politicians announcing more resources to tackle extremism and radicalisation. But there's little evidence their strategy is making a difference. In the battle for hearts and minds of young Muslims on the streets of our cities, it would seem that the government is losing.
Well, here on Earth in Birmingham with me now is Salma Yaqub, former leader of the Respect Party, who is now head of the Stop the War Coalition here in Birmingham, and Jahan Mahmood, a former government counter-extremism advisor. Salma, I'm wondering, take it from Paris, and then the vote in Parliament, and then, of course, the outcry from Mr. Trump. What sort of effect is that having on people here in Birmingham?
Well, it's a really, really testing time, a very frightening time, and a time where people are really scared to talk, because it's a place now where things can be so easily misunderstood that people are frightened to talk about how they're feeling.
And what about the vote, for example, on Syria? Did that exacerbate things, or that just went by on the nod?
No, I think it made things worse. I mean, foreign policy has been a major player in the radicalization of young Muslims. And the Syria vote, what we don't understand and what we'd like an explanation from 10 Downing Street is that on 4 October 2015, the Prime Minister said that Russian bombs will further radicalise and increase terrorism. However, on the 25th of November, he's calling Jeremy Corbyn and other MPs who opposed the Syria strike terror sympathisers.
If I go down to the Halal Bush down the road, will they be drawing those inconsistencies to my attention?
Well, no. I mean, you know, across society you have people at different levels of thinking, so you can't say that. However, the hypocrisy is there to be seen, and any kind of recruiter could quite easily use that to exploit young people, and that's where the argument lies, is that the government is not consistent and doesn't follow up with its own ideals, but expects Muslims to fall into place with them. Simple.
Well, I think when it comes to foreign policy, it's not just Muslims who have an issue with it. As citizens, many people have demonstrated against the war. In fact, the largest demonstration in British history was against the Iraq war. But what's happened is it has become an identity issue in the way the government talks about Muslims. And that's what's frightening, the them and us mentality, because it sows fear within the Muslim community, the irony being we are feared whilst we're very frightened ourselves. And of course, with people who don't know Muslims in their daily life and their social interactions as neighbours, you know, just seeing this one-sided view, understandably causes a lot of fear and misunderstanding. And that, for me, is what's really worrying and really scary.
How do people in the Muslim community talk about ISIS? What place does it have in their lives?
Well, in most Muslims' life, they don't really play a role, except that they're being used to further corner Muslims and make them feel isolated and subjugated. It's almost like we have to apologize for the actions of ISIS, which has emerged out of the Iraq war, has nothing to do with us, has been funded by British allies like Saudi and Qatar, who Muslims have to apologize for something we have absolutely nothing to do with. And you know, it just makes us feel sick to the bone that people can use Islam and hijack it in our name. But for some reason, we're being questioned by the motives and the political aspirations of a group who are not in Britain. They're many miles away. Why? That's the question.
You're no Muslim, bruv. I mean, would you say that of ISIS?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the kind of nuances as who can say somebody belongs to a faith or not, but the sentiment of you don't speak for us, you don't act for us, and we totally reject you, yes, and that does capture what most people are feeling. And I think what was nice about that sentiment was that it was not only echoed within the Muslim community, but the wider community picked up on it, and that's how it trended. And for me, that symbolises how there is far, far more that unites people than what divides, and how heartening that is, and how small things like that can have a huge impact.
Of course, Birmingham has seen this before, hasn't it? But with a different community. Just tell me what happened.
Yeah, well, we're in Birmingham right now. The Irish community, post the pub bombings by the IRA, they went through a similar feeling of being dehumanised, feeling demonised, that if you happen to be Irish, happen to have an Irish accent, you were automatically associated with terrorism. The Jewish community have been through this. You know, anti-Semitism is nothing new, but in Europe in the 1930s and 40s, it was of an extreme nature, and they were all stereotypes. So I say to Muslims, look, don't take it personally. It's geopolitics.
Is it true that this city wasn't able to stage a St. Patrick's Day parade for how long?
It was almost 30 years before the community felt confidence to come out. So showing how we can internalise that demonisation, feeling that you're the other, feeling that you're not trusted, that can really have a huge impact. And for me, that is a huge concern. But at the same time, what I'm optimistic about is that we should learn from that. And Birmingham itself has got huge resilience and positivity.
Well, just briefly, the Irish came back. Can the Muslim community come back?
It's actually interesting that someone said what she said. I grew up with the Irish community. I went to an Irish Catholic school. So I'm going through this for the second time, not the first time. And I believe that we can come out of it. And if anything that's come out of Trump and his stupid remarks is that more than 500,000 Brits signed that petition against him. That's a positive reaction by the British public. However, I'd like to see a similar reaction from the government now.
Jihan Mahmood, I'm afraid we're going to end there, but Salma Yaqub also, thank you very much indeed for talking with us.